Good morning. So also from my side, good morning everybody and welcome to our presentation about the S/4HANA transformation with LeanIX. And first of all, we are doing the presentation, two of us. Maybe Philipp, if you introduce yourself first.
Yeah, sure. So hope you can hear me from that point of view here. I'm happy to be here. I'm with Deloitte for a couple of years now, focusing heavily on enterprise architecture management within the last 8.5 years, and also engaging with quite a lot of tooling solutions in the past. On behalf of Deloitte, I'm also managing the partnership with LeanIX, so I'm happy to be like the third time on the Connect Day, and for the first time being on stage this time. So last year I still had the chance to see the presentation of my boss, so he's sitting in the audience as well, so hopefully we will do a good performance today. And yeah, I'm quite happy to show you today a more handsome foundational topic on how to use LeanIX in the context of an S/4HANA transformation, which is quite advantageous from some of the points we will show out and point out. And yeah, Jörg will give you an introduction as well on this person, and happy to guide him through the presentation.
Okay, thanks a lot. So to myself, so my name is Jörg Blom and I'm a director in the SAP service line. And in this SAP service line, I'm heading the SAP technology and also the capability platform and architecture. So everything what you need from the technology point of view in an S/4HANA transformation, that's basically with me. And I'm also heavily involved in our S/4HANA transformation, so and I want also to share a little bit also my experience, which I have. Let's have a look at the agenda. So first of all, we want to give you a quick heads up on Deloitte. I keep it short, right? But I think it's mandatory. So we want to go for and have a look at our SAP service portfolio. We want to have a deep dive look on the S/4HANA transformation approach. And then we look into the LeanIX, also showing samples, especially Philipp will show you, let's say, how we can use LeanIX. And finally, we also want to show you how you can integrate LeanIX in an SAP environment. So if we look at Deloitte, and maybe it's known especially here because we're also one of the premium partners, but we are one of the big four companies where we still do auditing and consulting under one roof. So these are figures globally. So we are one of, as I said, one of the big four. We have more than 300,000 employees. We have more than 80,000 SAP consultants. Maybe that's sometimes in Germany not known, so to give you some figures. We are usually delivering our project with a high quality, so we have a very high satisfaction rate, not really escalation, so our clients are really satisfied about our work. We are, as Philipp said, we are LeanIX partner since 2018, and we won also several awards. So that's the Pinnacle Award in SAP. That's one of the most important awards, and we won it in 2016, 17, 18 for S4. And in 2019, there is also a new award. It's a Digital Partner of the Year, which is Deloitte. And you can imagine everybody is dealing about digitalization today, and we are very proud of it, so that we also, let's say, it's recognized our experience here. On the right-hand side, maybe I also want to share it here. We have, usually if we do an S/4HANA transformation, we're working with a project team on-site, on the ground, and we're also using our nearshore and offshore capabilities, or near centers. They are all certified, and from my experience, it's also one of the reasons where we really are able to deliver a very high quality also in our transformation projects. Going a little more deeper in S4. So we have here some figures, let's say, from the Deloitte perspective. So first of all, we already set 147 projects live. And let's say, what does it mean? From our perspective, from the Deloitte perspective, and even when I look in my group, S4 is our daily business. So we not really have people who are working in the ERP area anymore. So since years, we are already doing transformation. We are already working in the SAP S4 area. And on the bottom, we have some figures from Gartner. So what we see also is that only 35% currently started with their S/4HANA transformation. So if you haven't started yet, you are not too late, but 1/3 only started at the moment. What's also very interesting is that Gartner, let's say 70% are doing a greenfield approach. So that means they are not doing, let's say, an upgrade, or in S4 it's called a conversion. They really take the opportunity to relook at the processes, to relook at their architecture, and start, mainly we call it selective greenfield, start with a new system. They look into the system, what maybe is good, which functionality is not available in S4 yet. Let's move it over to the new system. And even Deloitte, our experience is in our projects that we even have more than 70%. So currently we have 85% of our projects are green, they have the nature of greenfield. This might change in the future, that more people are going to a kind, we call it brownfield approach, but that is currently, let's say, the front runner, the clients who started with S4 are more looking into this greenfield approach. And today, this is also one part of our presentation. When we start with an S4 transformation, we call it phase 0 projects. And we already did 124, so 120 phase 0 projects. And so we have experience here, and that is something we want to share here, and how we can, and also to share how we can combine it with LeanIX. So looking at the, let's say, at the S/4HANA transformation as such, so what are the challenges, right? And we listed here it on the left-hand side. So one challenge is SAP came up and said, we only support your ERP system until 2025. On one hand side, we said, okay, let's say if I pay a little bit more maintenance fee, maybe I can survive, right? So, and it is really a hard deadline at the moment. And if I look into the market, if I look at the significant amount of clients who are running SAP, it's very hard to achieve. So in the market, let's say we are very occupied in this S/4HANA area. But also keep in mind 2025, what does it mean, right? So if we are in the project and you have a defect in your system, you want to have an upgrade from SAP, help from SAP, usually SAP asks you on which software level you are, and it gets quite difficult to get support from them if you are not on the newest stack. And this will maybe hit you in 2025. You said, okay, please help me. And they said, nah, we are not supporting it anymore. Maybe it's consulting work, you have to pay extra. And therefore, a lot of clients try to move as soon as possible. Then we have a need for digitalization. So everybody wants to go for robotics, everybody wants to go for IoT, everybody wants to go for artificial intelligence. This is something which comes with S/4HANA, which you don't have in ERP. Then maybe you want to go for new business models. Maybe you want to go do a model like pay-per-use, that you not sell your products anymore more completely. Some clients want to go for predictive maintenance, that you only want to send out your service engineers when it's needed. And we have an increase on user demands. I think that is also, if you are familiar with SAP and today you log onto an SAP system, and if I show this user interface, my daughter and my son, they will never accept it, right? So that is the transactions you have today. They are not web-based really. They are not enabled for a mobile device. That's different with S4. You mainly get a Fiori device, which is web-based and let's say also enabled on your mobile devices. And finally, and maybe that is also one of the reasons why our clients are, let's say, doing a greenfield approach, is that all the logic, and you haven't had other possibilities in the past, all the logic you put in your backend monolith, right? So, oh, I have to adjust something, I need functionality, let's put it in the backend. And we also had a discussion before the presentation here. Maybe you have a lot of IT people who are retiring soon, and these are the only people who know really how your system works. And therefore, today, also from the architectural point of view, you not put everything in the system of records anymore, so you put it also, let's say, more on the satellite systems. And if we have a look, let's say, on S4, it is not that you are changing, let's say, your ERP system and exchange it with an S4 HANA system, it's more, right? You introduce your S4HANA system and you have cloud applications around, for example. You have software as a service, so maybe Ariba for your vendors, Concur for traveling expenses, C4 for your clients and customers. So, and from my point of view, it is really a change in your architecture. So it's not that you only change one monolith. And on top of it, you have the SAP Cloud Platform, which is a kind of development platform with Leonardo. It comes with blockchain, it comes with IoT. So even you can extend your processes in your ecosystem. So at least to sum it up, it is completely changed in your environment. And what Deloitte does is, for sure, we do analysis with you together. So we look we'll have a look on your capabilities, what has to be changed. We select with you the right applications, so which application have to be introduced, so which cloud application, for example, you are going to use. Do you have a cloud-first approach, one example, or what we also see more and more into the market, you have systems on-premise, and you said, well, I want to move it to a hyperscaler. I want to move it to Google, AWS, or Azure. That's also what happened. So we define with you together the transformation roadmap. And Deloitte is not only doing auditing or a strategic advisory, we are also running big S4HANA transformations, so we implement also your system, your environment. And finally, you even can get from us AMS support. So usually if we have implemented a system, maybe it's also a good opportunity that we support you with application management support because we know the application. Having said that, let's have a look more a deep dive into phase 0. So in Deloitte, we have a methodology how we run an S4HANA transformation. It's our enterprise value delivery for SAP. And it starts with a prepare, explore, build phase, which is mainly agile. And then we go to a test phase, which is more waterfall, then to a deployment, and then we have our go live. And what we did in addition, we added, before we start with the real S4HANA transformation, we start with a phase 0 project. And in this phase 0 project, we look with you together on your capabilities with our capability framework. We specify with you the architecture principles, and also we discuss with you foundational concepts. For example, you want to have a harmonized chart of accounts. Maybe you want to go for shared services. From our point of view, if you want to build an S4HANA transformation, if you build a house, you need a solid cellar, right? And that is what happens in this phase. And we set up with you the transformation roadmap, and also we're looking at your business case. So often clients already have a business case. If you don't have, we help you to get a business case set up. And also there we have two types of projects. So one type of project is that the client has clarity, yes, we want to go that route, and we are almost clear about it, and we use a phase 0 project or phase only, let's say, to validate our requirements. Other clients use also this phase 0 to really prepare the case for S4HANA also for the board, right? This is also something which you can do. And what we also do in this early phase is that we establish the program governance, and we're also looking at project tools. And one of the tools every client has in the SAP space is the SAP Solution Manager. And also LeanIX, from my point of view, this is the right time to introduce, or I think the majority here of the people already have LeanIX, to validate your LeanIX, let's say, instance, and maybe even to connect the dots to your departments who are running LeanIX and where an S4HANA transformation is at the horizon. Whoops. Okay. So if we go and let's say the purpose of today is, this is our phase 0 framework. So we have what I said, we're looking at the business model, we're looking at the operational model. What also is underestimated, we're also looking at the change impact. So a lot of project fails because you're not talking to the people. So what is changing because you touch the processes. But today we want to look at the capability analysis and the architecture. And if we look in detail, what we are doing is we look with you what is the scope of the capability. So we have a capability framework, and maybe you have a more, your project scope is more, we want to look into the finance area, or more in the logistic or manufacturing area. So we determine with you in which area we want to look at. The second thing is you have, let's say, capabilities today, and you have a vision also, and we can develop it, where do you want to go? And there might be some capabilities where you said, well, that is standard, that is standard stuff every company does. I think that is, at least for us, something which you can also maybe do with SAP standard functionality. And there might be some special functionality which really is special for your company and also special in the market. And maybe even S/4HANA doesn't have these capabilities. And this is, for example, a candidate to let's say, a custom development. And therefore, we have often a selective greenfield where we said, okay, we start from scratch, we get rid of, let's say, all the 30 years we did before, and we only lift and shift the, let's say, the functionality over which is needed. And based on this capability target definition, we do a capability architecture mapping. We come up with a to-be application landscape. At this point in time, it's not 100%, but it is already a very good draft. I would say 90–95%. Then we can come up with an application inventory. So we know, okay, which application do we need? Maybe also sometimes important for your license discussions with SAP. And we look into SAP Cloud approach, as I said before. Let's not put everything in the backend system. Let's look if we use software as a service or even infrastructure as a service. We want to go for a hyperscaler. We want to be flexible. We want to save infrastructure costs. And finally, we define with you the transition scenario. So how do I come from the current state to the target state? And maybe there are some interim steps. And how we can support it with LeanIX. I would hand over to Philipp to give us some insights.
Yeah, thank you, Jörg. So this is probably the most important and interesting part for everyone having LeanIX already in place and facing an S/4HANA transformation. And the idea is like we will go through a couple of slides and screenshots from LeanIX to illustrate the steps Jörg has just announced and illustrated how that might look like in LeanIX and how a tool like an enterprise architecture suite, which might be in place, can be elaborated in such a situation. So the idea is also not to go through like a couple of slides. We're having templates and PowerPoints and Excel. So that would be, for example, the standard if you don't have a tool like LeanIX. But everything we point out, that can be illustrated in the standard version. So we don't show anything about customized or pre-configured LeanIX. It's all in the standard. And you can run the standard LeanIX in such a situation and transformation approach within the couple of weeks Jörg has pointed out. So when we look at the capability-driven segmentation, for example, there are a couple of models around. So we as Deloitte, we have, for example, the right-speed IT model where we differentiate between the more advanced IT systems we keep in place and those ones which are more foundational. There's also like a Gartner Pace layer model out of the market which can be applied. And basically, if you do that, you assign the capability prioritization to your business capabilities, or you can even do that on an application level where you can differentiate the applications which are more in scope and interesting for you, or those ones which are then like to be discontinued afterwards. And basically, you all know from LeanIX the heat mapping concept. So you have the tagging system. You can apply tags to either applications, business capabilities, whatever is in scope for you. And within the advanced filtering options of the illustration in the reports, you can then apply the heat mapping approach. So years ago, we did that quite often in PowerPoint, so it was fancy, nasty, detailed work. You have large-scale diagrams in DIN A0 mostly when you talk about SAP. Here, it's just one click away. You apply the filter, and then you have your wonderful heat map, which can be reproduced at no cost. There's also an aspect about the effort you might spend, so everything goes hand in hand with how much effort do I spend, for example, for the more differentiating, more sophisticated elements I have in my architecture, and which are the elements where I don't really put effort in, so which are not that differentiating for me as a company. That could be also illustrated, and you can also apply like the effort tagging as a further element within your architecture. So basically, at the beginning, when you define the target, when you define the capabilities which are of interest for you, so everything probably within the scope of ERP, then you can use the tagging as the most powerful mechanism in  to illustrate what you just have defined, for example, on a whiteboard.
When we go further into the target definition, it is about, so what are the capabilities I want to look at further? So what is like the target I'm focusing at? And here in the example, we just applied a very simple, oh, it's not working from that distance, very simple tagging and filtering. So we looked for all applications which are then related to the S4 SAP context. Or you apply, for example, a filter where you just look at the business capabilities which are of interest in your ERP. And you can also see here, we also use the tagging mechanisms here. So it's quite straightforward. So the tagging mechanism will help you to define your target, the target capabilities, the target maturity level as well. And if you want to have more sophisticated views, so I know there's some drawback if you just have a list in the inventory. You can still go with a free drawing, and I think LeanIX has announced in spring this year that you can also apply the filter mechanisms with the tags in the free drawing part. So you just apply like a lifecycle view, a Gartner Pace Layer view on the free drawing, and then you can illustrate your diagram of choice in the more advanced modeling mechanisms to show exactly, okay, so what is the target capability map I'm looking for example. So there's no need, for example, then to filter each time in the repository, and as you have learned, in the new model, we'll only have like saved searches in the future. You can have then, for example, like a free drawing we didn't illustrate here, but it's still like a second option you can apply. So when it goes into the pure architecture, and this is currently driving me in my one of the project assignments I'm involved in, so it's like a heavy SAP S4HANA transformation, how to get those capabilities then mapped to your architecture. And this is quite straightforward. So you know all probably in LeanIX, you can assign then your application landscape and the applications you have to your capability. So this is some mapping work you still do, either, for example, via an Excel export and import or via manual editing in the repository itself. And then you can also have, for example, a view on the landscape, how it will evolve over time. And here we tweaked that a little bit. We already included the target S4HANA applications. And that gives you, for example, a view on your current status. So what is currently still in place? What will be decommissioned in the future? So what are the applications which are end of life? And where will the new S4, for example, will come into place and then replace the existing applications which might be in scope. So giving you an example from the project I'm currently in, we're talking about 50 applications which will be replaced or connected to just one S4HANA module. And you can imagine later on how many interfaces that will be in the end. And having said that, it's a pain to do that in PowerPoint and Excel and to maintain the single source of truth outside a repository tool. So for the target definition, this is straightforward, and I really love that because you can weigh and apply quite a lot of lifecycle system in LeanIX. So everything has a lifecycle. You can assign the lifecycle to the object itself. You can assign a lifecycle to the relation to specific objects, which will then guide you through the transformation, for example. So here it is one example. So we have still applied the Pace Layer model as a view, and we just filtered via all SAP applications, and we just wanted to have a look at the future S4HANA landscape. So where does it take into consideration the capabilities I will support in the future? So what are the modules I have to select from SAP? And as Oliver has pointed out before, there will be more than SAP in the future. There will be probably some hybrid environments where you might have some satellite systems in there as well. And here, if you then would apply, for example, a tag filter and say, for example, filter for everything which is related to the ERP transformation, could be a tag itself. That will give you then the target picture you need in a very standard way, having all applications in place and even apply then further filtering mechanisms for illustrating the color coding. Another example, and this is quite handsome, it's always about identifying the dependencies in the landscape. So once you have included the application of choice, the target applications which are of interest of you, you then want to find out, okay, what are the dependencies to my as-is architecture? So what are, for example, interfaces I have to touch? What are legacy systems I have to keep into consideration? And then it's quite easy to use the Smart Explore feature, which is then launched quite soon. And then it will give you, for example, a view on your S4. So what is, for example, dependent on that? So we have like the full-blown S4 in this example. And then you might be interested in, okay, so what are the modules? What are the capabilities which are then dependent on that, for example? And that's just a click away. Before it was like some heavy work, maintaining Excel files, illustrating some PowerPoint, and here it's just a click. And then you have a very smart and easy overview about everything which is of interest for you. And it's mostly important that you ask the right question. So what do I want to see, basically, and what is then the dependency I want to illustrate in that feature? And if you go down the path, so this is a small mock-up, so as you can see, this is not like a resolution we typically have in our notebook. But here, we, for example, want to see, so what are the interfaces, which are, for example, dependent on my financial planning application module? What is the technology which will be used in the company? And what is, for example, further dependent on that? And this is just a small mock-up with like 10 interfaces. If you talk about a real-life example and having like one module in SAP and maintaining and trying to integrate a couple of applications, we talk about a couple of hundreds of interfaces. And this is very difficult to maintain in Excel. So in my current project, we went with the classical Excel approach, and then we moved to LeanIX. So in the Excel, we had a couple of hundreds of interfaces, and no one really had a clue on which is the latest version of the Excel and who owns it. Now we just work with LeanIX. We say, okay, everything, the single source of truth must be in LeanIX. So there's someone owning all the data, and we don't really care about any Excel file anymore. One of the things which also will end up in some sleepless nights is how will the future data flow look like. So here we made up a very small example where we have a simple data flow between S4 and the legacy world. In the real world, and you have seen the Bosch example yesterday with the 10,000s of applications, so it won't end up like that with a couple of 10,000s of interfaces, but you might have to touch a couple of hundred interfaces. And you would like to know, okay, where's, for example, my purchase order flowing through the application? So where is S4 integrated and involved? Where is, for example, a pre-configured system involved, and where will the purchase order will end up in the later stage? And this is something you can very easily compute with the standard data flow diagram. And as you know, you can do it for any object which is of interest for you. You can, for example, just focus on a specific data object. You can just focus on a specific application module from SAP. And then it will provide you the answer which is of choice and interest for you to understand, okay, so how will the current integration look like, and how will the future integration look like? And as you know, every interface you have here, so for example, the one from controlling to CIS, so which is just a random example, can be attached with their own life cycle. So you can also do a forward planning. So when will this interface has to be implemented in the future? And how many interfaces, for example, will be implemented in 2020 or 21? So that are the questions which drive a large-scale transformation. And LeanIX will provide you the basis to define everything which is of interest for that, to define an appropriate target. So Jörg has also pointed out that it is about assessing and maintaining the whole application inventory. So if you already have LeanIX in place, you might have populated a repository already with a couple of applications and IT components. And having that already in place will give you the advantage that you can then connect your S/4HANA transformation approach, so all the objects which can then enter new in your repository, connect to your legacy world, connect to the current projects which are running. Because we are not only interested in the S4 transformation project, we are also interested in projects which will maintain the current application landscape. We're talking about years of transformation, and we know that the legacy world won't stop at the time we introduce S4. They will also involve. There might be some more interfaces come up. So we also have to keep that in mind. And that's so important to understand, okay, so there is more than just my S4 world in the repository. There's quite a lot of more IT evolving. So from the cloud approach, it's also interesting to understand, okay, where will the future IT components will be hosted? So what are the services I will be used? So will there be some applications coming from a pure cloud environment? Will some of the applications will be on-premise? This is a simple mock-up. So you know from if you're heavily engaged in the free drawing that the cloud symbol, for example, looks a bit different. However, the key message here is that every element you have here can be easily connected to a component in your repository and then can state you all of the information which are then documentable. So the lifecycle information, the dependencies, also the relations to the capabilities. And the free drawing is one of the means which can give you somehow a visual interpretation of what the target might look like and how the cloud approach might look like, but it will also connect the pure information which are in your repository and will state the value which was already connected in the data which is in there. So last but not least, it's also about forward planning, and we're talking about years, not like having a few weeks to introduce S4, but like having a few years to introduce S4. And it's also about to find, okay, what is the suitable and good transformation scenario for myself? And here, the metrics, which can be easily switched to a time-bound approach so that you have, for example, the years on the x-axis and the capabilities or user group on the y-axis will then provide you the view on, okay, so when will there be a cut over? So this is the example for a Big Bang approach. So there will be like one date where we switch that up, but there's also the option to have like other transition scenarios in there and to connect the lifecycle information and maintain that to illustrate, okay, so what will be a suitable transformation scenario for me? In the past, you might have known tools where you can play around with a couple of solutions and ways, and then you check in the solution that will be the future target. So this is probably not that advanced here, but it will give you a very easy guidance, okay, so how will the future look like? And you can easily then, for example, select the lifecycle information. You could also filter via the Gartner Pace Layer model again to see, okay, how will the Pace Layer modeled applications I have selected here will then come into action. Yeah, and this is basically everything about the way how you can apply LeanIX. So as you've seen, everything is in the standard available. It goes straight forward with everything you have there, and it, of course, beneficial from that you connect all of the data which you already have in your repository with your transformation, which will then be presented further on from Jörg. Ja, du hast.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Philipp. So I think what we have seen and what we learned during the presentation so far is that LeanIX, to introduce LeanIX, it's a good chance to do it in phase 0. And there might be, and I think we are on a LeanIX conference here, you already have it in place, or the majority has it in place, but I hope it gets some more clearer if there is an S/4HANA transformation in your company ongoing, that it's more than only to exchange the monoliths, right? So get connected if you are the enterprise architect. If you are not involved, get connected, and it's a good chance, let's say, to facilitate LeanIX at this point in time. Then I think Philipp already presented it during the S/4HANA transformation, which might take, let's say, even a couple of years, depends on the size of the project. LeanIX really supports it. And you know, we come in a phase 0, we come in a company to our clients and said, okay, where is your as-is application documentation? And it's mainly, if no tool approach is used, outdated. And even then, during the project, we are building interface maps, for example. It has to be updated all the time. And if we can use a tool where it automatically gets generated, it's really an asset. And finally, let's say even after go live, if we leave and the transformation is done, LeanIX is your strategic tool to facilitate and to maintain your landscape. It's not easy, let's say, to keep, even if you have a tool, to keep all the information up to date. So there are two possibilities, two clients, right? One client is we haven't introduced LeanIX yet, so you have to start to build your repository. On the other hand, if you already have LeanIX, you have to ensure that your content is up to date, right? And if it is not, there are also some accelerators. What I said before, let's say Solution Manager is one of the tools, and the Solution Manager did a big step from SAP, so from 7.2 to from 7.1 to 7.2. So there are much more capabilities. And there are also third-party add-ons, which you can use, for example, if you use the SAP middleware, PIPO, or the new one is CPI in the cloud. You can even transfer information from your middleware into the LeanIX repository. If we do a deep dive more, let's say, on the SAP Solution Manager, what I said before, all the landscape information is in Solution Manager. Every client needs a Solution Manager because it's the gate to SAP, but you can use it much, much more. And also we as Deloitte and our transformation projects, we are using also Solution Manager also to document processes, the process structure as a document repository. So there are a lot of information in Solution Manager which you can use to replicate in LeanIX. It's not an automatic interface right now, it's a semi-automatic, but I think it's better than to do it manually. And finally, what you even can do, and it depends a little bit on your approach, you even can go down to the technical architecture. So some clients do, some don't. to model their technical architecture in LeanIX. But that is even possible with SAP, that you even replicate on a fact sheet also your technical architecture too. To sum it up, we believe that every S/4HANA transformation needs an analysis phase, also to, let's say, relook at the scope, relook at the estimates, relook at the business case. LeanIX for sure supports us, so we are not working with PowerPoints, Excel files anymore, so we have really an updated repository. We have a consistent view, as Philipp shows, on the technical artifacts, and we have an integration also to the SAP landscape to get information automatically into the LeanIX repository. And therefore, our conclusion is LeanIX acts as an accelerator for our projects. Having said that, we also have a stand. So if you want to get connected to us, it's a stand number 1. It's close to the main entrance, close to the main conference room. And yeah, thank you for your attention, and we open up for questions. So I can open. Yeah, I think so.
So first, thank you very much. Very interesting insight. I have a question regarding your interface into SAP Solution Manager and SAP PI. How much effort is it? Semi-automatic is fully okay.
I haven't used the third-party plugin yet. I think from the Solution Manager perspective, usually to do a download, upload with a CSV file, it's not much effort, right? So that's usually something you can, if I compare the effort anyhow you have in a transformation project, I think that's not really countable.
So do you provide a workspace, a LeanIX workspace for every client you are consulting within a project? And if so, do you define the processes which are being realized in SAP in the SAP Solution Manager and import these processes then into LeanIX, or vice versa?
So maybe I cover the first part and Jörg will cover the second part. So regarding the workspace, that really depends on the client situation we are in. So we are in touch all of the time with the partner management, and if we have the chance to use LeanIX in such a transformation approach, we bring it in, so for sure. It really depends on the setup on the client, so some are really willing to share information in the cloud, so there's always a huge discussion from my experience when we go into a discussion, do we want to use LeanIX? Yeah, where's my data stored and who's in control of the data? And this is something we have to cope with before going into the project itself. I know there are all of the certifications available, that LeanIX is a quite safe place for all of the data from our clients, but that has to be made transparent before going into.
Yeah, and let me answer the second part of the question. So first of all, it depends if you really want to document your process model in LeanIX. That's the first, let's say, decision you have to take. If I look, let's say, in our transformation projects, in the past, the solution manager was not capable to really to draw the process models as such. With 7.2, it changed. And also we in Deloitte now look at it. So should we use our previous tools to document the processes, which we do? It's called in Deloitte IP5, where we have the process models, where we agree with the client, okay, is this the processes you want to go for? And now Solution Manager 7.2 gets more and more capabilities to do also the other drawings, right? Yeah. That's,
hello. Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. And we're going through an SAP transformation as for HANA at the moment, so it's all very relevant. And hence the question more around how can you clarify a little bit more how you guys apply this in practice? So who puts what into which system in your experience? Is it the team leads? Is it the solution architect on the SAP side, or is it the enterprise architect on the business side? And where do the masters lie? So where do you master the application list and the interface list, and how all that interconnects together? Thank you.
You want to answer?
Yeah, so let's, so the process, let's say what usually an S/4HANA transformation is structured like that you have a solution architect and you have process streams. And these process streams, let's say, capture the processes and document the processes. And the technical stream usually, let's say, capture the more application-specific information, and they also have to set up and design the application, right? And you have different layers. You have the to-be application layer, and then you really have to go down, let's say, on the technical architecture. So that's a shared responsibility. On one hand side, more process-driven from the functional teams, more technical-driven from the architect and the technical team.
The integration with some solution manager, is it only a one-off action to learn data and to use, or is it continuous integration to keep both streams on the same level later on?
I think you have to keep it in sync, right? And therefore it's one time you start, but you have to do it, let's say, you have to sync it regularly. Right? Otherwise, it will be out of sync. And that is maybe also a pain. If it is not automatically, you have to take sure that it is updated in a timely manner, right?
But this approach for later I have to provide by my own, or I have to...
Yeah.
Okay.
Until now.
We will come with a service later on.
Okay. Any further questions? Other than that, what I said, or yeah? One last question.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I was a bit surprised that your framework is based on an analysis of the capabilities, and that the transformation starts not with the analysis of the processes.
Yeah, so we have a set of capabilities, predefined capabilities, and we see that from our point of view, the capabilities are, let's say, one layer above the processes. So if you already start with the processes, it's much more effort, and you have to do a much more deep dive. And in this phase 0 project, you really want to build the seller. And we, let's say, we start with CXO interviews to get their priorities, and then we go to each, let's say, department to get, let's say, the most out of it, what is important for you, what not. And this is, let's say, our guidance is our capability framework. Right?
So that will not exclude that you also do it on a process level?
Later on, we have to go on the process level for sure, but I think for a first analysis, we have very good experience to start with capabilities. Okay.
Well then, thank you very much. Enjoy the second day of the Connect Day, and hopefully we meet each other at our booth later on.